Button should be just a sec. Okay, I think we're live. So if everybody's ready, we'll go ahead and get started. Call the January 13th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and public have been duly notified. We do have 3 new members today, so I wanted to welcome them and ask that why don't we all go around and just give a quick introduction so we all know who the other is and little quick background about yourself. On my screen, Ron, we're going to start with you. We're going to go left to right, top to bottom. So Ron, why don't you start?
I'm Ron Denton. I've been on the Planning Commission quite a long time. And been a resident for as long as I've been a commission member, I guess. By profession, I'm an architect here on doing a lot of work on the island, and then also went to the dark side and have been doing some building as well. That's kind of it in a nutshell. I think, what my offerings with the commission is a little bit of an understanding of the zoning ordinance and an attitude of always trying to check the ordinance for unintended consequences and stuff like that. And that's kind of my story.
Steve, you're next on my screen.
Great. Hi, this is Steve Corney. I'm new to the commission as of today. I've lived on Isle of Palms for 25 years. I've got family scattered all over the low country in South Carolina. It seems like dozens of nieces and nephews and extended family. By profession, I'm a civil environmental engineer. I've done projects really all over the country, all over the world. Every phase from finance to planning to management to execution, wide ranges of clients from the Department of Defense to private sector. So just a whole bunch of different things in the resume.
Okay, thank you. Sandy, you're next.
Yeah, Sandy Stone. I've moved to the island back in the early 70s. Done a lot of different things, but back in 90s, I bought Island Realty from my mother and father. Was in real estate at the time, and still in real estate. Own Island Realty, and I'm slowly but surely migrating over ownership to 2 of my 3 sons, who all live here in the community. And I don't know, I've been vacation rentals, general brokerage. We have a laundry that we manage, do the housekeeping for many of our properties, and outside contract work. Do some maintenance on the properties, and was previously on the commission back in 2000, what was it, 8 and 9 maybe. Then was on city council from 2010 to 2013. Just seems like yesterday, huh, Ron?
It does.
I think I left Ron right there where he's sitting. Glad to be back.
This is the best gig you can find in town. Don't
the
jump to the
great.
commission. I mean, to the council. You'll have much more fun here.
Exactly. Married, obviously, and I just love the island, near and dear. That's it. That's all I got.
Thank you, Sandy. Marty, is the order on everybody else's screen matching mine, or is it okay?
I don't think so. No.
Marty, go ahead.
Hey everyone, my name is Marty Brown. I came on board with the Planning Commission in June, I guess, of last year to replace some of the outgoing members. I'm also a civil engineer with a 16-year career, strictly in aviation. So primarily I support business efforts in the Rocky Mountain and Pacific region, United States. And I've lived on the island since 2012, so 8 going on 9 years now. And hopefully I can offer some unbiased and perspective with regards to the business realm, but bring a little engineering expertise and just a general interest in keeping and making this place good. Got one young son, 2.5 years old, and another one on the way. Should be here in a couple weeks. By the way, I'm not going to be at the next meeting.
Don't blame you. I
Good
wouldn't be either.
segue to mention that. So other than that, no, I just hope to bring a few gray hairs to this group. No, that was a joke.
Thank you, Marty. Scott, you're next on my list.
Hi, I've been Scott Pierce, been here about 8 or 9 years now. Joined with Marty last summer and have about 35 plus years of corporate experience in finance and operations. And just looking forward to working with all of you to help the community out.
Nicole, how about
Me?
Yes, please. Just so we know.
Okay. My name is Nicole. I take the minutes for all of the boards and commissions and for city council and all of their committee meetings. And you'll probably largely hear absolutely nothing from me unless votes go askew.
Thank you. David, how about you?
Hi, I'm David Cohen. I moved to the Isle of Palms back around 81, bounced around several places on the island, settled in 1990 at Cameron and 32nd, been there since then. I'm an electronic systems engineer, started working for the shipyard, moved to Nevelex, which became Spaywar, which became Nice East, became Spaywar, and has now changed the name again. I retired a year ago after 36 years working for the Navy as a lead systems engineer for electronic systems, primarily intelligence systems. And my last couple of years was as a lead systems engineer for the Department for Data Science. Let's see. My wife and my 22-year-old daughter who just graduated. And now that I'm retired, I've got a lot more time. I served on planning commission, I think it was 2009 to 14. And that was right before we rebuilt our house here. So that's my experience.
Was Ron here then too, David?
Ron was here too. Yes, and Sandy had just, I think we overlapped the first year.
Okay. All right, very good. And Lisa, you're next.
Hi, I'm Lisa Safford. Primarily been involved in commercial real estate and development for the last, I don't even know how long, 30 years, I guess. Been on the planning commission twice, I guess, for varying lengths of time, and excited to see some new membership. And I too just want to help this community grow and prosper.
All right, thank you. Let's go to nomination and election of chairman and vice chair. I'll start the process, and then whoever is the lucky one can take it from there. Nominations for chairman.
I nominate Ron Denton. It's his turn.
I've had
I'll
turns.
second that.
I've had turns.
You've had turns?
I've had years ago. Happy to do it, but I certainly entertain maybe David. He's retired and he's been on the board before.
That's a good idea.
I don't know, David, you're up for it, but
I'd rather not the first year of getting back into it, but
fair enough. Fair enough.
I'll second the nomination for Ron.
Okay, any other nominations? All right, with none, we'll close that and take a vote. All in favor of Ron as chairman, signify by saying aye.
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 All right, Ron, you're the lucky one. Take it from here.
Yeah, oh boy,
It's his turn.
it's my turn. Everybody gets a turn. Look under your
Yeah.
seat. There's a car. So our next order is to nominate proposals for vice chairman. Any nominations? Don't be shy. Everybody's here, so we can't nominate the absentee, right?
I'll nominate Lisa. How's that?
No, how about you? I think Scott.
I haven't been here very long either, but
You're very organized though, and that's, that helps.
Yeah,
Being organized.
it's tough following Rick. He was kind of organized.
yes.
I would nominate Scott Pierce in case that got missed.
I'll
We need a
second it.
s-
That would
I'll
Okay,
second
that one's
it.
got a second.
I
We
see
can
it.
hear you.
Oh, I said, is this where everybody steps backward kind of thing? Yeah.
Since back relieved.
Any
You
other
might not have-
nomination?
The vice chair doesn't have to chair very many meetings usually.
Any other nominations? If none, we have a second. We'll take it to a vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Nay. Votes unanimous, sorry.
Oh, thank you.
Congratulations. So now I gotta cheat. Damn screen.
So next
So-
is the approval of the December 9th meeting minutes, Ron.
That's correct. Are there any comments or do we have a motion for approval of the minutes as written?
Motion to approve?
We have a motion to approve. Is there any comments about anything on the minutes? If none, we need a second.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. So Douglas,
Yes,
the RFP for the drainage, I guess,
yes.
old business or
Yeah,
new
so,
business.
well, so this is a project that we had talked about. Now it's been over a year ago, so it may predate even Marty and Scott's time on the commission. But I think it was middle of last year, the Planning Commission had kind of access or there was money in the budget to do drainage work. Planning Commission bantered around different ideas as to how to use that money. One idea was to do a master plan to kind of queue up the next projects and identify the next needs on the drainage system. The other idea was to spend the money that we were the money budgeted towards actual construction projects. At the time last year, the Planning Commission felt like the best use of the money was to go ahead and do construction projects and not do a plan. And so that's what's underway now, and those projects are set to begin at the end of this month. So those are moving forward at this point, and they're going to be done. But in the budgeting process, the staff talked with the council about, we now have these smaller projects about to start. We have a very large project that's on the horizon. It should start in a year that the city is borrowing money towards for the outfalls at the back of the island around 30th, 36th, and 41st. And the idea was at this point, once those projects are done, it gets much more challenging to identify the low-hanging fruit at that point. Basically, the island will be at a point where the drainage in Wild Dunes is taken care of. The drainage, the next priority for the city was the areas between 57th and 54th, I think. That's now been done. The next priority was 53rd through 44th. That's been done. And now these projects are on the hit list. And really the staff is now starting to get to a point where we don't know where the next obvious drainage projects would be and how to kind of best leverage the resources that we have to get the best bang for the buck in the outgoing years. So money was put into the budget for a master plan, and the council would like for the planning commission to basically handle that RFP process. This is similar to what happened with choosing the Outfalls project that's underway. The staff developed the RFP with the input and then basically the review by the planning commission. Planning commission modified it, came up with additional ideas. It went out. The planning commission then took the role as kind of judging the RFPs for, which one best suits the city, and then ultimately made a recommendation to city council as to which engineering firm to hire. That went through the Public Works Committee and then ultimately the council to hire on. And currently the engineer doing the work for the city has been Thomas and Hutton. So with this project, this thought is that we would follow that same process. We would develop the RFP, get back those proposals, give them to you all. You all would discuss them, grade them, interview. Probably, I want to say that in the last go round, we identified the top 3 or 4 to call back for interviews. We then interviewed those 3 or 4, and each member kind of gave them a grade on a set of criteria that was also developed, kind of a scorecard. So that's the first that we've talked about this, and I just wanted to kind of let you all know that I would anticipate having a draft of the RFP for you all to review at your next meeting. Just wanted to put that out there, foreshadow that would be coming down the pipe, and see if there was any questions, concerns, comments, anything like that. None. So that'll be a good project. That'll be a useful tool for the city and in both the budgeting, going forward budgeting and really setting up the city for success in terms of getting some drainage relief on the island. So that's all I have on that.
Sandy here.
Yeah, go ahead, Sandy.
What is the amount that was set aside, not having?
I think it's 200,000. It was basically, and we got the pricing last time when we were making the judgments as to what was the best use of money. I want to say it's $200,000.
And just to encapsulate what the RFP might entail for that.
Yeah, so we expect that it would go through basically analyze the problem areas that we have kind of a sequence and a methodology to analyze the problems, to identify future projects, both large and small, and then ultimately give us a roadmap that said, okay, if you can afford X dollars per year, this is how we would prioritize it to ultimately get you to a point where the entire island is draining well and performing as it should, which we really don't have. I mean, we've been very kind of hit or miss, but up until this point, it's been very obvious. I mean, we've had areas on the island that were clearly the most problematic, and it was just obvious where the money needed to be spent. And as I said, it's getting to a point where it's less obvious.
Douglas, is this incremental to all the projects that are already in flight or that will be completed?
Yes. Yeah, these would be. So once this plan is done, the city's going to be fairly well kind of tapped out in terms of borrowing. Well, I mean, we could borrow more if we chose, but the expectation is that we're probably going to need to breathe for a little bit to let finances recoup before we'll have the ability to do another major project. We've always kind of had a lag of 4 or 5 years to allow us to get things in order for our next big project. So yes, that would ultimately be the goal would be to have the next projects identified and prepare in terms of getting funding together. And we would not be getting these things fully designed. It would be very conceptual, high level. This is clearly an underperforming system that needs a lot of work. And and it would be an estimate of cost. I mean, it won't be bid level cost. It would be estimates of cost. But it would give us the roadmap forward to spend on drainage work.
I mean, you're a lot more familiar with this than I am, but I guess kind of to Sandy's point too, on the cost of, and the RFP, it sounded like with all the projects that are in flight, once they're completed, it sounds like there's not that much left to address, or?
I would say that that's fairly true. I would say that's fairly accurate. You're now talking about really the areas from 30th Avenue west, I would call it west, to Breach Inlet is the last remaining part of the island that has received almost no attention in terms of drainage work. And I would say the problems in those areas are more isolated and not quite as severe as they were on other parts of the island. Yeah, I would classify them as less severe than what we have been dealing with.
Okay, yeah, kind of run that through mind. Does the RFP include identifying problem areas, or is the city going to identify them? And that would kind of pertain to, would it be better to split it up so that the initial survey is to identify all the areas, then figuring out which ones that we would want to address later in a second proposal to how to address them?
So I think that the way I envision this RFP working is the chosen consultant would identify and prioritize the problems based on need, cost, and kind of parameters that we give them, but that would be done in conjunction either with the Planning Commission started a list, but the Public Works staff has kind of a running list of where we're seeing the bad problems. So I think that they will create that priority, and it will be based on some kind of algorithm of what we can afford when and what we get the most bang for the buck and most relief. Just kind of provide us with a model of how to sequence that work.
Is there any value to having that list from Public Works if they've already got one of what the remaining problem areas are before we let that out? Or I guess I'm just trying to size up that is this a solution looking for a major problem that may be being taken care of with all the years of drainage projects? Or are there really significant remaining problems that need to be addressed?
There are lists. I mean, we could look at them. In my mind, yeah. And actually, the Planning Commission started a list. We could. It's very tough, as a layman, I can tell you that from my standpoint, it's very tough to look at a problem and to quantify it in terms of and relate it to other problems, because in front of the person that it's adjacent to, it's a massive problem. When you start to kind of look at it in terms of how many people is it affecting, what's the cost benefit of fixing that problem, it starts to get very and to me it seems to be a bit subjective, and I think we could have some benefit of expert analysis to make it less subjective, where there's clearly a method in how we're prioritizing these, and we're not doing the work next to Scott's house because he's a planning commissioner. We're doing it
You never do that.
So that's part of the benefit that I would see, to kind of put it in the hands of experts, and I am always just shocked at the expense of doing these projects.
Yeah, I just recall at I think it was the last meeting, I think you actually put up the picture and then pointed it out that after some of the storms, you had a map that showed sort of the wet areas, but we had a hard time identifying if it was an inch of water or 2 feet of water, and if it was there the next day, kind of thing. But it was a coverage. I'm guessing these folks would help us identify that. how dramatic the problem is or isn't.
Well, we do now have a commission full of engineers, so maybe
Yeah.
they can help, shed some light on quantifying those things and analyzing them and prioritizing them. And but as a layperson and as part of the solution at the staff level, I can tell you that identifying the next projects on the hit list has not been an easy thing to do.
Now, from the hits list, project list, I mean, we've gotten design on the the outfalls on Waterway Boulevard. Have they really designed anything or addressed the viability or need of resolving the blockage upstream? Or is that going to be part of the RFP?
So Ron, that is the big upcoming project is
Yeah.
is unclogging the ends of those lines. And that's kind of the project that's a year and a half away. The work that's starting in a week is basically getting the canals open and the drainage ways open that lead to those outfalls. But
Right.
they're not going to see the full benefit of that work until the big project happens on the end. For the benefit of the newer members, and you've probably been witness to it, but the real focus has been in the areas between 30th and 41st. It's been the most problematic area that we haven't addressed. And the problem that's been identified is that the marsh on the backside of the island has silted in over the years, and we do not have clear channels to let the water get off the island. So that project is going to involve clearing those canals all the way out to the intercoastal waterway and sealing off the back of the island so that at high tide, part of the problem that we were seeing is that if an event happened with a high tide, there was no capacity in the pipe system, so it would lead to more problems. So they're going to be sealing off. This project is going to be to seal off the waterway from coming back into the system and to provide that clear outflow so that the water can get off the island.
What's the timeline on this and what kind of review period are we expecting?
Well, I would anticipate that the planning commission's work would probably be about 3 months. You all would need to proof the RFP. We'd need to give time for responses to come back to the RFP. You then would need to review the responses, interview the responders that you identify as kind of the top responders, and then make a recommendation. So I would put a 3-month timeline on that part of the project. And I'm not sure if your question was the planning commission's timeline or then the respondent's timeline once they're awarded the work.
No, that was part of my question for sure. So the review of the RFP itself would be the first month. Is that what you said for us
Yes.
to look at? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Next month, I would anticipate you having a draft of the RFP.
Okay. So we'll have ample time to kind of hash out some of these concerns.
Yes. And I would say the last go round, reviewing the RFP really kind of gave some meat to the discussion in terms of what, how you wanted to see it progress forward.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at.
And then I'll also say that by virtue of the responses in the RFP, there was a lot of, I would say, valuable information just given. It was kind of like, hey, this is how we think this is how we have proposed to do this work. And I think some firms seem to kind of shine through a little brighter in that process and really, kind of confirm, I guess, that was the next step. any questions about, so, and part of this meeting, I was hoping that it would be a bit of a kind of orientation for the new members and to get people back onto the same page. And any questions about kind of the background on drainage? I mean, that's a whole, and I don't know that we need to get too far down that rabbit hole, but is anybody have any questions about just kind of overarching questions about drainage and where we've been and the planning commission?
I have one that kind of wrestles through my mind over the past few years is, are we looking at doing anything to reduce the amount of runoff, or just trying to address the existing runoff and future runoff needs?
Well, so I can say that 2019, so now, basically really a year and a half ago, it was clearly a goal of the Planning Commission to reduce runoff. So there was about 4 ordinances in a row with that goal in mind. One reduced all of the coverage allowance down from 40 to 35. A second one was to require all new hardscaping to be pervious. So no more concrete, no more asphalt on residential properties. Another one was to limit the amount of fill to 1 foot above the road. But prior to that, you could basically put as much as you wanted, as long as it, an engineer certified it wasn't going to damage an adjacent property. And then the last one was to even further reduce the coverage for lots using septic systems. So I do think, and that went down from 40 to 30%. So I do think that David, was kind of the initial focus, was let's try to reduce the amount getting into the system by new construction. And the Planning Commission analyzed, kind of what the last several years of work, they got the as-built surveys for everything that had been built in the last few years, and they analyzed the amount of coverage that those projects covered. How detrimental to those projects would it be if they were to be squeezed a little bit more? So I think they found that shrinking 5% more would not have been too penalizing for any particular project. That basically, if folks knew that wicket up front, they could design accordingly and meet that goal. So it's a long-winded way of saying.
Yeah, I'm familiar with those, and I kind of view them not doing a whole lot. So I'll kind of defer to the civil. And again, hate to bring this up at the first meeting or whatever, but since we're on the subject, and from what I can understand, you could have 60% coverage and have less runoff than a lot with 40, depending on how it's landscaped and all. So by not addressing the actual runoff, other than what we currently have, which is no increase over what it was previous, which means we're not fixing any prior issues of people pushing water off their property into the neighbor's property. We're just allowed it to continue. So that was kind of where I was going with that question is it worth re-looking at it? And like I said, I'll kind of defer more to the civil engineers that we have of, look, is there more that we could do to prevent runoff as opposed to trying to deal with the increasing runoff that we seem to be having.
Yep. Marty, I can't remember if I can kind of capture the general sentiment at the time was that stormwater management was best handled at the large scale, at the municipal level versus trying to regulate, every individual lot to the nth degree. The Planning Commission did look at communities that were doing things like requiring residential development to have retention things of that nature to basically reduce. But I think at the time, the sentiment was that you're really that the city would be seen as trying to manage the stormwater problems by shifting the burden to property owners instead of handling it at a municipal level. I think that kind of summarizes my takeaway. Marty, were you on the commission at that time?
No, I think that was before my time, but zoomed out on the macro scale on this issue, I think there's value in both. I mean, that's the obvious answer. I mean, managing it from the municipal level and updating your structures and things like that is something that's certainly carries a lot of value, and also making sure you've got the appropriate development codes in place to not make matters worse. It doesn't take a civil engineer to know that, but no, yeah, those specific conversations were before my era.
Well,
Unless I'm remembering something wrong.
And I would say that it probably should also be considered as part of the master plan. Whatever firm we retain should also be looking at what can we be doing to minimize runoff. That's an important part of the master plan.
So that might be something that we would want to include in the RFP for them to look at our current
Exactly.
ordinances and what could be done without severely impacting property owners.
Exactly.
And that's kind of where I was going with the question.
And I do think that's what the town of Mount Pleasant did in the old village. Ron, you're familiar with that. I think that was the example of
It was.
kind of requiring retention at the lot level, isn't it?
Correct. And requiring that it be truly engineered. So, right now in most other communities, including our own, we have the NPDES, which, it requires us to have a proper drainage plan. And in layman's terms, our obligation is to send the water to the street. And several years ago, we had, of course, people from SCDOT to tell us that, our drainage swales on the side of the road were designed for the runoff of their street, not for all the neighboring properties that we just all happen to throw water at. While that solves part of the problem locally per lot, you're sending it in a single direction. The city doesn't have capacity. We don't have any storm sewer to speak of. And most of the engineers so far have really kind of shied away from piping stormwater runoff and would prefer open swales and things of that nature as a means to get the water towards the back of the island. The retention of water, we've been starting to do that more inherently with rain gardens is a nice little euphemism for them, which are smaller contained retention areas. So you dig essentially a pit, a lot of them are maybe 8 by 8 by 6 feet deep, filled with gravel, have pipes leading to them, and surface runoff can be directed to essentially an on-property drainage culvert. Sometimes you have several of them, and that water can sit there until nature will allow that water to seep into the soils and disperse. I'm not a civil engineer, but I also, I just wonder, is all runoff surface? You could do calculations of permeability of the dirt, the soil, how quickly water will migrate to the ground, but then really, where does it go? We have high water tables here, and they're saturated. You could dig a hole in the ground 2 to 3 feet and find our water table anymore, and that still is probably migratory water. And so, is that even moving? And where does that move to? Is that all moving to waterways? So it's a big problem, and one that I don't know that can be solved solely on the individual lot basis. I think you need a whole citywide system for resolution. And as commissioners, we took the advice of getting more land area around a structure to kind of retain or hold or dissipate, so much of that property's surface water. But, now we're left with the community-wide approach. How do you get that water, say, from Palm Boulevard all the way back to Waterway and beyond, and then it not regurgitating back at high tide?
Well, I think it's definitely a good point as to something we can certainly include in the scope for the respondents to look at. Look at how look at what the codes currently allow and see if there's some tweaks that can be done to change that and to improve it. To me, it does jump out that if we're allowing 35% of a lot to be covered, we're basically requiring that 65% be open. We're also requiring a drainage plan. So we're forcing the involvement of a stormwater professional. It almost doesn't seem too burdensome to add on to that. Hey, make the hired engineer that you're already having to use work in some mechanism to retain the water to some degree. So maybe there's some, it's almost like we have parts of the puzzle already there, and maybe it's just a little tweak that makes it that much more useful that a respondent could point out to us.
Yeah, I think in the village, they're requiring retention of the entire surface area, but maybe, we don't have, well, in some areas we do have the village's problems. But what if we studied a percentage of water volume that has to be maintained or retained on the lot before it's just charged out? The rain gardens are not high tech and they're not very expensive, but they seem to work like charms.
Are you talking about like an infiltration area, Ron, when you say rain garden?
It's that pit essentially. So when I've done them, we recently did one or 6 of them, maybe even 8 on one property on Palm Boulevard that we swaled water to. And the guy we were digging our pervious driveway, and even the pervious driveway in this case was overdone. We had 18 inches of gravel so that the water underneath the driveway would hold water. But when we were doing that, one of those hurricane storms came through. It wasn't a hurricane, but it was a pretty bad storm, maybe a tropical storm. And we were surcharging water out of the front yard and throwing it into one of these rain gardens. And that water kept on pumping in, and went nowhere. It just kind of went in the ground and disappeared.
Right.
So, it was quite nice. And they were all interconnected with corrugated pipe and all to other rain gardens dispersed through the property. Now, it was a good sized piece of property. I've done a localized one in Wild Dunes where it wasn't actually, there was standing water when we completed the house. That standing water wasn't actually on his property. It was the right of way. But on his property, he dug a rain garden and drew the water from the right of way into his rain garden so that he wouldn't have to look at surface water in his front yard. And that was a very simple maneuver and worked. So we can consider, requiring that of more property owners in new development or major renovations. Those are usually our 2 toggles. It's just part of the overall landscaping plan or site plan.
All right, good. I think that's a good comment. We'll plan on putting that into the RFP. If there are no other points on that, are we ready to go to the comprehensive plan? And I wanted to, again, just kind of give the new members an overview of what we're doing and where we are in the process. And I don't know that we're going to spend a tremendous amount of time on this tonight, but more kind of set the stage for what we're going to do going forward. So the city has a comprehensive plan, and every city in South Carolina, if you're going to be in the world of regulating planning functions and zoning, you have to have a comprehensive plan. The state has established the criteria for those plans. And I think there's 7, maybe 8 elements that you're required to have. So all of these plans from city to city kind of look very similar to one another in terms of their makeup, but the content is obviously wildly different depending on the size of the city and the issues of the city. But part of the requirement is that the plan be reviewed every 5 years and updated every 10 years. You can, in those 5-year reviews, basically just as a group, as the planning commission, you can look at it and say, yes, it's still relevant. It's all still here and in good shape, and you don't have to make any changes. If you review it and you get to a point where it's obvious to you that it needs changes or it needs updating, you then trigger to an update. You don't have to do an update, but every 10 years, but the city has always done an update at the 5-year period. So we are in that, we're in that window now of updating it. And of the 7 or 8 elements, the planning commission has basically taken a strategy of looking at the goals of each element at a series of meetings, basically analyzing just that element and just those goals and strategies. To try to do one per meeting, and then work and identify whether or not the goals and strategies are still relevant, if they still, and how the city's doing in terms of meeting those goals and strategies, and verify whether or not they need to be changed, shifted, supported, taken out. And so that's been a process we've been going through. We have already done the natural resources element, we've done the transportation element, and we've done the community facilities element. We still have remaining the economic element, the cultural resources element, housing, land use, and priority investment. I think of those 3 or 4 are so are pretty minor in the scope of the plan. So I think they'll be relatively easy, but we did have in your packets the economic section. And I don't know, as this is really just kind of an introduction at this point, if it's the will of the group to get into that element tonight. It's probably I think it may be the shortest in the entire plan. I don't know if we want to take a month, just kind of familiarize yourself with the entire document and hold discussion till next month. The new commissioners have only been, I think you were formally announced just last week. So that's kind of for the will of the group. There's not, there is a 5-year timeline put on the review. I've never heard of any community, as long as it's being worked on and it's being consistently looked at, I've never heard of a community being in trouble for not meeting any specific deadline. So I don't really consider ourselves under a time crunch. But any thoughts on whether or not we want to hold the discussion on the economic element, or do we want to?
Well, let me ask a question. Would the new folks rather wait another month? And I was thinking, I don't know if we've distributed that kind of tracking thing, Marty, that you've been driving with lately, to the latest version to everybody for them to kind of get familiar with the format. I wonder if that would help. We were trying to organize it in a way where we could I think what Douglas just acknowledged, is it still valid? Is it funded? What shape is it in? That kind of a matrix, so that we could just kind of charge right through the I don't know, would you all rather wait a month and get familiar with all that, or it's up to you?
Yeah, and Scott, they have not seen the matrix. As far as I don't think they have. I don't think the matrix is out there yet.
I guess it may come down to how closely you all have been following along with our meetings up to this point. And not to put anybody on the spot or anything, but if you have, then you're already familiar. But if you're not, then maybe you need a minute.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Discussion.
I have, speaking for myself, I have been following along, so I understand what the process is. I haven't seen the matrix that Scott and Marty are talking about. That might be helpful to see, to understand the process you're going through. But as far as updating the plan and being familiar with the plan, I'm comfortable with that. I just might need a little time to understand your matrix.
Was your matrix just the sections and how they were going to be reviewed, or?
Yeah, it was just an organ. It was more of a way to just kind of clip through it in kind of a structured way. I don't know, Marty, do you want to throw it up on a screen or something? Or I don't know if you've got it or not.
So, David, it was breaking down each goal, and then the commission would come up with basically a grading as to how that goal is being met. And we had a color scoring system. Either we were green and all is good with it, or yellow where it's important, but we're not really, it needs work, or it's red. We're not either meeting the goal or we're not satisfied.
May not be funded, or it just hasn't been addressed. Yeah.
Yeah, and then some of the strategies and goals were just eliminated entirely. The commission would talk about them and agree that, that was relevant 5 years ago, but it really is not an issue anymore. So some would.
I was going to say for this one, looking through it, the only one I really had a question with was the goal 2.31. I'll read. Determine the impact of tourists daily, short-term, long-term on the island's revenue and cost structure. And it was initiate a comprehensive study by an outside agency. So I was kind of wondering if that was done as part of the old plan, or is that still a goal that's never been accomplished?
Yeah, that goal has never been done. It has, I would say that it has been somewhat informally done by the city's treasurer and the city staff. But there's never been an outside agency hired to do it as it's described there.
And that was my question. If it's been done, we need to take it out. If it's not been done, we need to leave it in and keep it as a plan. And that was really my only comment on the one what you sent out.
Sandy, what are your thoughts? You probably were you on? You probably were on the commission the last time we did the conference plan.
Yes.
All right, we got a historian. That's good.
Yeah. Are you calling me a fossil? What's
No, God, I'm the fossil.
Yeah, no, and to Dave's point, that one kind of jumped out at me too. I remember our briefly, Douglas, some of our discussions on that, and we I believe the police department took over a lot of that data compilation and was submitting it regularly to the council. And I don't know how we get back to that without cooperation on their part for some of these things. And then that the other part of this 2.3.1 in my mind was, is it funded, to y'all's point? And I don't know that it is, although there is some language, Douglas, in our new business licensing, if I'm not mistaken. It didn't planning put some language in to do something along these lines moving forward?
Well, to me, 2.3.1 is really talking about the economics, the fees being collected, where the work done by the planning commission was more on the quality of life type things. So it was more dealing with how to deal with infractions of short-term rental issues and what the maximum occupancies during the day. So I don't think the work was done on specifically economic impacts.
Okay. In an effort to move forward, I don't have a problem taking that out. I don't see it happening.
Well, do we want to? It sounds like everybody's a go with looking at it.
Sure.
do we want to just start from the key issues?
I
And
would
we'll
just
hold-
ask if Marty could, and after the fact, just bring our discussion back to that matrix, because we don't have the matrix now, but just so that we have that continuity through this update of the plan.
Marty, you don't have the matrix, correct? I
Well,
don't think.
Scott prepared it, so
Oh,
I,
we
ha-
do?
I have it. I just I think somebody needs to grant me permission to
Oh.
share my screen, maybe.
Is that how that works?
I'm used to working in Microsoft Teams too, so I'm always rusty when I get on a Zoom call, but I don't see anything apparent where I can take control.
It'd be, I think it's up at the top. Oh, wait a minute, here it is at the bottom. Yeah, bottom share screen. Marty?
Is that one of your buttons?
I'm not seeing the option to. You're seeing it, Scott?
Yeah, I've got one.
Yeah, me too.
I do too.
So
It's
do
up
I.
at the top of
It
mine.
has your mute, video, participants, chat, share screen, record.
You may have to move your mouse around to get it to at the bottom of the screen to get it to come up.
Are you on?
Oh,
Are you
hold
on
on.
full screen? Yeah,
Hold
you might
on.
want to.
Yep. Yeah, I
Get out
just
of
don't
full
have it. I think
I'm
you guys are
seeing-
the privileged ones.
Hold on. Marty, I'm seeing in my advanced sharing options, it looks like I have who can share only host. So let me see if that,
It's weird that you guys are seeing the option though,
Yeah.
and I'm not, so I'm not sure.
well, so Marty, nothing's changing for you, obviously. I did have it on my screen, I tell you what, though, I mean, to me, the goals are, why don't we?
You want me to try to share mine?
Yeah, if you can, Scott.
Let me see if this will work.
There we go.
Hey,
I have it.
Okay, let me not ruin this. Okay. How do I minimize you guys? There we go. And let me try this.
Very good.
Is that working?
Yes, perfect.
Yes.
Okay, and I can go on my other screen and watch you guys. How's that?
So
There we
let's just start with goal 2.1, balance the needs of residents and tourists with those of the environment.
Probably still relevant. Yeah.
Yep.
I was good with all of them.
Yep.
yes,
Anybody see, so let's kind of go through each and just say if we think this supports the vision. I guess let's just kind of go left to right. So strategy 2.1.1, establish policies and procedures to ensure that beaches, marshlands, and marinas are protected and preserved. I think, any thoughts that does not support our vision? I think that's a yes.
That's it.
I think our status is good there. Any other? I mean, we're always working to improve, but any thoughts?
I agree.
A measure of success. It's gonna be tough, I think.
That's definitely.
You know, I think
An
we had.
objective.
Yeah, I think we had this on the. We also had this in the natural benefits section of.
Is this with the ordinances and things of that nature that are passed in for compliance?
Yeah, I think to me the measures of success would be if we see improvement or that we don't see degradation of beaches, marshlands, or the marina. It does, it does kind of ask the question now that I really look at it, that I do think that this is a very similar goal and strategy that was in the natural benefits section. And knowing that this is in the, I guess it's, any thoughts on whether or not it's belonging in the economic section?
No, I agree with where you're going there, Douglas. I was thinking the same thing.
I guess the thought was not to go, not to focus so much on the economic benefits that it leads to some kind of loss of balance, but maybe that's why it's in the economic section.
Douglas, Sandy here. As I remember discussions years ago, that the impact of any degradation of any of those items could have had an economic impact. And so I seem to remember our talking about that in kind of a big world program that we need the beaches, we need the marshlands and the marina to preserve some of the economies of scale that our city enjoys.
Well, and I think that would support the idea that maybe this is one that does belong in both economic element and natural benefits section, natural resources section.
Without any one of them, do we have a healthy economy as we know it now?
Assigned and funded.
Is that an NA?
Yes, I would think so.
So your measure of success going back is to when we track how much the island spends on environmental projects, I guess, compared to our overall budget. Trying to figure out how it fits into the economic section here.
Well, to Sandy's point, I think that it only fits in that if something were to happen to any of those parts of the environment.
Right, that's where I was kind of going. Are we having to spend money on making environmental repairs because we don't have the policies to protect them?
Any thoughts on that?
And I understand that what you're talking about are macro issues, but aren't there smaller issues too? I mean, if we're trying to protect those resources, aren't things like plastic bans and litter bans and other things also indirect? Those have economic impacts, but they also have a positive impact on the environment.
Well, yeah, that was kind of the reasoning for having it in the two places. But you use plastic bags. How much do we spend doing beach cleanup? And if we see that we're in the future, we are having to spend more on it, then do we want to change our, policies like ban plastic bags?
So, David, it sounds to me, that I think goes to the strategy that we started this discussion on about hiring an outside agency to analyze that, right?
Well, no, just from the island standpoint, again, that was where I was trying to think of the measures of success for the island is, do we see an increasing budget spent to preserve the island? And if we are having to spend more money to do it, then do we have the right policies and procedures in place designed to protect it? I was trying to read the strategy wasn't necessarily about protecting the environment. It was about the policies and procedures are in place to protect the environment. And then we measure that by our expenditures to do cleanup, I guess. Again, I was kind of trying to figure out how that fit into the environmental part or into the economic part, sorry.
So a measure of success would be if the city, if there continues to be a low cost to the city to protect the environment, basically that is a success. Is that?
Right, up to that, yeah, exactly how you'd word it, I'm not sure right offhand, but.
Yeah, I think that's good. Cost per.
Yeah.
If it got too expensive, we'd need to analyze it. I think, David, is your point.
Right, that's.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? I don't have any notes or updates.
Do you think that's really what they're after here? I think it's that. Plus, I think they're trying to say we have to protect tourism by protecting our beaches, marshlands, and marinas. And that also could be measured by, tourism dollars that flow through the community. I think it's both. I think it's, we're trying, the overall goal is balance needs of residents and tourists with those of the environment. So it's.
Yeah, I think in the context of the goal, that can have a whole different tack. Lisa, I think you're right.
I think it's both. I think y'all are on the right track from, we don't want increased cost to protect tourism. I mean, to protect our beaches and marinas, et cetera, but I also think it's trying to say that it's an economic benefit to maintain these things because they help our economy through tourism.
I think that's.
But
correct.
also to balance that with the residential needs of our community.
I think some of that comes in later, but specific to this goal of this strategy, it's about, to me, it's ties back to how much are we spending money, and if we're having to spend money to maintain the environment, then we're not spending money that we could be spending on our residents, kind of thing.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is getting back to the balance between tourism and residents, i.e. cleanup of the beach, the flyovers, all of those things are part of, I think, this economic goal. So tourism provides us with dollars, but if there's an increasing cost to maintaining the same quality of life, because we have increased tourism or whatever, then you're on the right track for what you're saying. And we can measure that. But like I said, there's still this balancing thing that I think we need to take into account somehow between tourism and residential way of life.
I think that you're both kind of saying the same thing, and I think that it is acknowledging that the beaches in Marshlands have a natural benefit and they have an economic benefit, which is the rationale why they're in both elements. And I guess now, having talked it through, I can see that rationale and think it's probably the correct format. Any other comments on that? Are we ready to move to 2.1.2? Encourage business development commensurate with the needs of the local community. Tim, I don't know what the thoughts are, but I do think that that's kind of at the focus of what the council seems like. Every move they make, they have that in their mind of not stomping on the business development in the community and being supportive of that. I think there is an acknowledgement that that there's benefit to that, to the residents and the tourists.
I would agree.
Any other comments? Sandy, interested to hear what you have to say as a.
No, I agree. it is relevant, and I think that it's ongoing, and council is, as a guide for residents and council, which is what this document is. I think that says it very nicely.
Okay, I would say we're green. Anybody else think otherwise? On the measures of success, I'm not quite sure how to fit this into a matrix, but I think that the city council starts every budgeting session with analyzing revenues back to the city, and they almost all start with some kind of business. It's either, a lot of it's property taxes, but other than that, it's all accommodations taxes, business license taxes. So I think a measure of success is healthy revenue stream to the city.
Yeah.
My only thought on that is to complement what you're saying, is that there's no gross deviation from the past. And I think that's how you would measure. If there was an erosion of past economic impacts, for instance, hospitality tax, let's say because there's a pandemic, then that might be something to look at, but I don't see it as an issue. Just need to be aware of these deviations and what causes them. So,
Is that the sort of thing that might be addressed in the strategic plan, Douglas?
Yes, I think so. I know everybody is focused on revenues into the city and, striking the correct balance. So I think that certainly will be a focus.
So yeah, when you said that, it's really not necessarily a focus on the revenue as much as focusing on the balance of revenue.
I would say that's correct. I guess it's working on the assumption that the current balance is roughly
Right.
correct.
Should we reword this then somehow, or?
Minimal change in the balance between commercial and residential revenue, or
Just, okay, add about the balance between the commercial, okay.
just as a side note, when I read that, when I look at, my first thoughts went back to the grocery store of, the island trying to see the residents' needs by trying to get a grocery store to replace the existing one instead of turning it into some other business that may have generated more revenue.
Yeah, and just this year there was 2020, there was a good discussion about cracking the ordinances to allow hotel, a small hotel, a boutique hotel. And it was a good discussion about how much revenue will that generate and what's the offsetting consequence of it. And ultimately council decided that basically the money didn't warrant the change. So, I think it's a good point. I think it's.
Yeah. So how do you measure those successes? So.
Well, I think your comment about a balance, that basically you don't jump for every dollar that you need. You try to balance it correctly.
Oh, and I think every year it's fairly simple. You could just look at the revenue stream sources and bucketize them and look at the percent of revenue generated by each one. If one starts going up dramatically while another one's going down, you're going to have a trend line there.
Right.
The other thing I think that we can see, and I don't know if everybody's seen it in the current comprehensive plan, that over that prior 10-year period that was measured, the rental units they increased 26%, while the residential decreased 6%, which is a pretty telling. I mean, that was a lagging indicator, but I'm guessing, and that was taken as of 2010. It would be interesting to see what those statistics look like over the last 10 years and where they're headed. I'm guessing that the trend line probably continued that way. So that kind of goes, that strikes that comment about the goal, about the balance between the residents and the tourists. I think what we're going to find in the stats is that the tourist side is growing dramatically while the residents is flat. Douglas, I don't know, do you have any insight in that at all?
My sense, and we do kind of go back to it, seems like every year, my sense is that it is fairly flat. That
the residential or the hospitality too?
Both. And Sandy would be a good one to talk to on this, but that the number of rentals has generally been flat at a third of the housing stock, and that different ones come, different ones go, but that it stays basically the same. And that was that started the analysis of the short-term rentals that the Planning Commission also did. I guess that was 2019, kind of a look at the trends on those. But my sense is that the numbers stay generally flat, that the revenue kind of ebbs and flows as things do with the economy, like pandemics. And
do you know when we'll have that, any of those stats, Douglas? I'm just looking at the little microcosm of our street, and I think in the last 3 years we've had 30 hospitality rooms added just on our block. 20 or 30 anyway.
That's a good point about the revenue, I think, has gone up, but the number of units. So it could be that old small houses with very few rooms get replaced by.
Now these were big beachfront, yeah.
Were there more rooms in the new houses than the?
Well, they were brand new beachfront that probably I think on tax rolls, they're probably looking at 4 or 5 rooms, but I think they're renting out at 6 or 7 or 8 apiece or more.
Well, we definitely have the data, and each year we get it, and we can pull that out and look at it. We did, like I said, I think we did it. Maybe it's been a little over a year ago, but it was generally kind of flat at that point. And there's always, go ahead, Sandy.
Yeah, actually the trend that I'm seeing most is vacation rental homes being taken off of the programs and turned into true second homes.
Second homes
available for rent. I'm seeing a very slight decline in the number of properties available. Now, it's very hard to go through everybody's website and count every single property because of the Vrbo and Airbnb and other sites to know exactly what they have available. But I can tell you from the Wild Dunes perspective, Beachside, Island Realty, Carroll Realty, those perspectives where they have websites, we track those quarterly and count how many properties everybody has. And there's a small reduction that's going on and has been all through 2019 and 2020 in the number of rental units. Now, to Douglas's point, they do move around a lot. If we had 1,600 in 2018, we have about 1,600 in 2019 and 1,600 in 2020 and et cetera. But they aren't all the same houses. They sell, some become second homes, some live in them. It's interesting how that shift in migration's taking place. So.
Any thoughts, Sandy, on whether or not if the number is the same, is the basically the capacity, would you think is the same? In other words, are the rentals that are out there, getting larger and have more rooms. I think Scott referenced the number of actual rooms being added, and I don't, to my knowledge, we've never tracked that, but it's kind of an interesting point. Is the room count expanding, but the numbers staying the same of rental licenses? You think that's a possibility? Is that?
It could be. I'm not seeing it overall. Again, we'll lose one and we'll gain one.
And there'll be an occupancy of 12 and another one with an occupancy of 12.
Yeah.
Hey,
Exactly.
Douglas, is there any opportunity to leverage that software that the city uses for policing some of the harder to track VRBOs that Sandy mentioned? Is that something that can be used to aggregate
Yes.
data and get a better count? Or is that something you're already
Yes.
doing maybe?
Yes, it is. And last year's count, so we did get a count basically to analyze the effectiveness and justify the cost of that software. So we did have a pretty, so we do have that amount, those numbers. And I
What
will
about
say
rental
that,
license?
say that again?
What about rental license?
Yes, that's what it's tracking. Rental licenses. This software that Marty is referencing highlights the properties that are being listed without a license. So they've kind of generated this enforcement list for us. So there was a little bit of a gap there. It was less than, it was about 100. So it wasn't a huge number, but I will also say that Sandy, and I can't remember if you all have access to it, but that there was another software where we're getting true counts on, the number of licenses and the number of properties being rented. There's another software out there that's tracking actual rentals. So, where a house might have a license, they may only rent it 5 times in the year, but they still had the license. But there is software out there that actually tracks, that this rental is this number of bedrooms and it's occupied at this level. The city opted not to. We thought about it for a little while to kind of analyze the budget impacts of the pandemic, but we didn't do it. Sandy, were you one of the firms that has access to that? And do you remember the software I'm talking about?
So yes, and it's a market analysis for rate comparisons and occupancy based on what appears to be open on a website. And we do, and that's a good question. And I haven't looked at the dashboard in that in many months. I'll make a point to see what data I can pull from that and send it to you, Douglas, to send.
Would it identify historical trends? Do you know, Sandy? Like over the years, occupancy levels and occupancy loads?
It might. The College of Charleston did that for so long with their department and did a bunch of the communities, but they've stopped that. Not enough participants, unfortunately. When Vacasa came in, they pulled all their data out, and so we weren't getting a good comparison. It was actually Island Realty and Wild Dunes were the only ones feeding it in the end. So, but Douglas, your software that you have that identifies unlicensed properties is fairly limited, is it not, to only certain sites?
That's correct. It is.
Yeah, so it's not getting a full market view either of some of these other sites that might be out there. That people.
It's getting the big, what we all kind of consider the big national level sites.
Probably Airbnb and Vrbo.
Yeah, HomeAway.
Yeah.
Has the island ever had an inventory of hospitality rooms, which wouldn't that be the metric that really drives volume on the island of people and everything else?
Well, I
Rather
think
than-
that
rather
and
than units.
occupancy,
Yeah,
to me,
and
it would be-
occupancy. Yeah.
but no, we have never done that. And I don't think we could get to occupancy unless that tool that Sandy was mentioning could do it. But I don't know. Be interesting to see.
Can we roll all these ideas and to use those tools into the measure of success? I mean, I'm looking on the screen and it looks like the measure of success, it seems like really more of a strategy. I mean, maybe redundant with the strategy that's in there, but more specific. And then for the measure of success, put in there an inventory of sorts or an aggregation of data. Even if the tools aren't there, it's something that can be done.
I think that's a good idea, Marty.
Well,
I do
I think, isn't that the strategy we started the discussion with 2.3.1?
Exactly. Oh, well, I thought we were looking at 2.1.2.
We're on two. We're all the way to 2.1.2 today.
Yeah.
Well, but I think that Marty, kind of what you're talking about is that right?
Yeah, I'm gonna reread that one.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be an outside agency.
Yeah, I mean, I think we batted this around last fall about, to really get an inventory. We've got a few thousand units here. To get an inventory of hospitality rooms wouldn't really be that big a lift. It'd be pretty easy to do. Just, might take a couple of months with some college kids or something.
I wonder if it would be meaningful if you could only do it kind of a snapshot in time.
Well, yeah, it would baseline things. I think even even if it's not 100% accurate, Douglas, just having a baseline inventory of hospitality rooms on the island, and then you can track the occupancy. It's just a step. But I think we might be either pleasantly or unpleasantly shocked at how many actual hospitality rooms we have on the island now.
I think it probably does fit better into goal 2.3. Somehow I feel like we morphed that conversation from 2.1.2 into 2.3.
Yeah.
And that could also help with the revenue relationships on the island. If you had that data, might help you with the compliance and all.
So if we agree that's more and a future strategy, and this one, I think.
Which one? Where we were? I'll go back to where we were.
Yeah, we're 2.1.3.
So are we going to keep this, or what did we want to do about Marty's comment? That way, on this here measure of success.
Well, I'm seeing now that after Douglas pointed that out, I'm seeing that my comment is probably more applicable to goal 2.3 and strategy 2.1.
Okay.
So,
all right. So leave that and then on to here. Okay.
Sure.
So 2.1.3 and 2.1.1 are very closely related, obviously. One is to establish the policies and one is to monitor the systems, is how I would read that.
Yep.
So we probably discussed, I think they're basically kind of one discussion and the same, the policies and their effectiveness.
So the footnotes, if I may, on 1.1 there, ongoing is the building department and city council. And I see that, establish policy and procedures to ensure that beaches, marshlands, and marinas are protected and preserved. I really see that kind of as the building department overseeing the zoning and the city kind of doing the zoning to maintain those entities. 2.13, maintain and enhance an effective monitoring system to ensure beaches, marshes, and marinas are properly maintained. Douglas, do we still employ coastal science services to measure the sand on the beaches? And
Yes, we do.
heck out there that reports back to us about the health of the marshlands, and then the marina, I think, is kind of the general government city council to the footnotes that are there.
Yeah.
And so I think they're different entities, and I like the way they're worded.
That's a good point. I think that that 2.1.3 probably is beach monitoring, basically, to be because that was such a huge economic hurdle to get over every 7 years when the beach would need renourishment, that we needed to kind of stay in front of the monitoring.
Do you want to add something here or change something, or?
Again, I would defer to the footnotes at the bottom, ongoing general government and city council. I mean, I see this all as a guide for anyone that's looking at the community and or hopefully council sort of in their goals and strategies also to embrace. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, when this is done, we present it to council, they review it and kind of take it to heart.
That's correct.
For a year anyway.
And I would just add that on this strategy, since this plan was last drafted and reviewed, there has been the beach maintenance fund created. That's an additional, I think it's an additional 0.5% on accommodations. Isn't it, Sandy? 0.5%?
Yes.
That's building at $400,000 or $500,000 a year to ultimately pay for that those renourishment projects when they come up. But that was not in effect when that strategy was put in place. And like I said, it was when that it would come up, it was like it was obviously a huge pill for the city to swallow when those nourishment projects came up, and they'll be less disruptive in the future because of those funds.
Well, should I guess, Sandy and Douglas, should we add some wording in here about replenishment and renourishment? So that's probably going to be ongoing for the next, forever.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I will say
maintained and replenished or renourished, or
yes, I think that, to me, that didn't hit me over the head when I first read it like it probably should have. That I think, because we're not really doing anything to monitor marshes. Well, maybe we are monitoring the marina to some extent, but really I think the beaches are the big one there.
is that the right word, renourished?
Yes.
Yeah.
I hate to backtrack, but on this one up here, and I think Sandy pointed this out, this is sort of ongoing, but we've got an assignment. Should somebody be assigned, or a couple of groups be assigned to this one here? Ongoing to, who is that?
I think that's city council.
City council.
Yeah, I think through zoning, council, absolutely, and perhaps even the building department. But it's also a function of the marketplace for what's allowed.
Does that work? Or?
I would say that the building department cannot really encourage business development.
Right.
that really needs to come from council, and they're making those decisions. And, you know, I go back to this example of the small hotels. You know, we put it in front of them as to, hey, this is an opportunity, but they ultimately make that decision. And I think it is. I think they are the right group to make the policies that either encourage or that make those judgments.
Okay. So on 213, with the shape of the beach, are there replenishments that need to be done? Is it green? Is it yellow? It's probably
I
not
think
red.
we're green in terms of monitoring.
Okay.
So Douglas, to your point, is it the building department and city council that establish policies and procedures to ensure that beaches, I'm at 1.1, marshes and marinas are protected and preserved?
So I kind of go back to remembering we're still in the economic section. So to me, the measure of success in this is that we are actually budgeting money for beach monitoring, to use that as an example.
Yeah, you're at 2.1.3, David?
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That to me, the measure of success is when the need happens, that there is adequate funding in place. And if when it happens, we don't have adequate funding, I'd say that we haven't been successful there. Sandy, back to your question on 2.1.1, I do think that the building department is really the procedures, and council is really the policies. So I think that probably reads correctly.
Okay. I agree.
I would say that yes, on that we are funded, Scott. And you might just make a note for future reading in the notes section that the beach maintenance fund was created since the last update of this plan. So if we're good there, this next one is interesting timing. The goal, I don't think there's any debate about the goal of maintaining a sound tax base. It does jump out at me that there is no mention of property taxes in those strategies, but I guess that is what it is. But this strategy 2.2.1 is clearly specific about watching the state legislature. And I do recall at the time there was this kind of issue of the state collecting taxes heavily from the low country and then redistributing it kind of evenly across the state without giving an equitable share back to the low country. So I know that's what that was kind of the thrust of that. But now, if you think about it, the most recent thing is to require, the state is considering requiring beach communities to provide endless free parking so really no mechanism to get any revenue back from the visitors that just show up on the shoulder of the road and leave their stuff and call the police. And so that's interesting that was in there back then, and it seems to come full circle, and it's probably more relevant now than it's been for a number of years.
how do we ensure that any of that happens? That we have no control over it, do we?
Yeah, all we can really do is monitor and lobby, kind of do what we can do to contact our legislators.
I think that we lean on the municipal association heavily.
Yeah.
Through Desiree and her and Ronald and their associations with those folks and their lobbying efforts, but it purely is a lobbying effort when things don't seem to be equitable with legislation. So yeah, Larry Groom's legislation is got some serious ramifications for beaches all up and down the coast.
Well, are we at risk with uncontrollable volume and total requirement for us to fund all of the services that go along with that? That's a problem. What would we say we are here? Are we green, yellow, or even heading towards red because of the? No, seriously. I mean, we can't. We're going to continue to get crushed every year. It's more volume, more volume.
Right.
Yeah, on this one, and maybe, I don't know. This week, it seems like we're red. I don't know if there's support at the legislature.
Well, this one in particular is the accommodation tax. So,
Right.
So I can tell you that
that's true. That's right.
The upstate legislatures will defer to, you get all those accommodations taxes, to David's point, and the hospitality tax, to which you decide how you spend it, meaning city council. If you spend it, and our municipality allocates a certain amount of those monies towards the police and the fire departments and the sanitation, based on formulas that, if I'm not mistaken, were presented many years ago to allow us to share those monies with those different departments and fund police, fire, and sanitation department workers. And so it's not all on the backs of the property owners and taxpayers in the communities. I mean, that's just the argument. I don't necessarily buy into it. In all outward appearances, it seems that we kind of unfairly get dumped on, which we do. At different
yeah, so now we're getting back into 231 again, I think, but of doing the study of how much revenue do we get from tourism, how much money do we spend on tourism, and from the, like you said, accommodation taxes, and then our expenses for having the beach. I think that is something that probably does need to be studied. And we keep kind of seeming to sidetrack into that realm on almost every one of these.
Yeah.
Yeah, to go along with that, don't we give money to the Regional Development Alliance as well to promote tourism and
the Visitors Bureau?
Yeah.
That's $500,000 funding every year.
Yeah.
So that's a legislative mandate that the CVB get, or if the business community on the Isle of Palms were to form an association, a business association, they could petition for those monies to the city of Isle of Palms, but it is mandated that it must be 25% accommodations income for this community be spent on the promotion of tourism, meaning marketing.
But does that have to go to the Charleston one, or Sandy, or can that be? I thought I heard that Sullivan's Island and Folly and the others have they're doing it themselves. They're doing their self-promotion, their self-marketing.
Yes,
and not sending those that have that kind of funding to the Charleston Bureau.
Yes, however, it must be spent on marketing, advertising. It's not coming back to the community in any shape, fashion, or form. They're hiring either their own marketing firm or building their own websites and or marketing firms. So it's very clear. 25% of every dollar that comes in on accommodations has to be spent on marketing. The Isle of Palms, we did it years ago. Malcolm and oh my gosh, can't even think of all the people that we had working on it. The Long Island Cafe, Buddy and Patty, and Malcolm and myself, a lot of other people used to take those monies, and we would print a brochure, and before websites were out there. And then it got so big and arduous, we passed it along to Helen Hill at the CVB to manage it. So it's a lot of money now.
Yeah.
Does the in looking at strategy 2.2.1, I guess I am wondering if the accommodations tax, basically, shouldn't it be all revenues involved with state taxes, not just the accommodations tax?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I
would
think
say
that would be a fair assessment, because you're dealing with almost, I'm going to say, last time I counted, were 33 revenue streams, income streams to the city of Isle of Palms. The taxes on your utility bills. Oh gosh, yeah, there's a lot more than property tax and accommodations tax.
do we want to put ourselves at yellow?
So
I mean, it does seem like we're constantly kind of under attack.
I think green would probably not be, that might be the compromise right now.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if I got this wording correctly. When I changed accommodation to all, does that still read right?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm not sure why island communities, is it plural or just to the island community?
I guess the thought was, yeah.
I don't know if we were separating Wild Dunes from those outside the gates and inside the gates when we wrote.
No, I think that was getting at it. It impacts all of the, it impacts Sullivan's Island, Folly Beach, Edisto, that there's kind of a picking.
Typically it does. Yeah.
Kiowa. That they see it as kind of a, the golden egg down at the Low Country. Measure of success, I would say it, an equitable
Equitable funding for city services.
Yeah.
I probably need to figure out a way to measure the equitable portion of that, but it'll be a placeholder for now. Equitable.
And I don't know that funding, I guess it would either be unfunded if we're talking about lobbyists, or NA, and that we kind of do our own lobbying, I guess, and the municipal association does our lobbying for us.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we don't want a relationship formally, because
Sandy broke up. If we don't want to what?
Address that association, the municipal association. We don't Isle of Palms does not have a lobbyist per se, other than the council members. And they run hot and cold any given year for their involvement. But the municipal association is constant. I believe we pay dues as a community, the city does, to that association for their services, which are many. It's not just lobbying. How do we want to recognize that association as doing our bidding for it?
Yeah, I think that might be a good comment for the notes, and that we may also just put in the notes that just to know what we talked about, this idea of the state is currently considering prohibiting cities from being able to charge for beach parking.
So this one to me ties.
It's,
Oh, go ahead.
It's the South Carolina Municipal Association,
yeah, it's a totally different thing. It's not the.
not the Isle of Palms business. Yeah,
Just MASC, Scott.
Okay.
there you go.
M.
M, as in municipal.
Oh, and,
Yeah. that's-
Yeah, and I'm saying it backwards. It's the Municipal Association of South Carolina, MASC.
but for people like me that don't know what it is.
So while Scott's typing on that one,
I kind of had a comment.
go ahead.
In the one we had earlier, so we have a kind of budget, I guess, incoming funding source. Like I said, there's multiple sources of funding. And so what we're really kind of trying to do is there a change in the percentage of that budget? And is it due to legislation? Is it due to change in tourism? So it's really, I think all these kind of get back to identifying any changes in the budget that are the revenue stream that, is either from legislation, change in tourism, or is it changes that we as a city planned? So that we at least know why the funding sources are changing.
So David, would that be a new strategy?
No, that goes back to kind of the measure of success for all of these is that we track our budget over time each year, and we identify whether our budget's changing because of outside influences, or is it changing because we want to inflict a change and change the ratio of revenue as a city. But I think a lot of these are kind of getting into that as far as a measure of success.
So I think Scott just put it in 2.2.1, but are you saying that and 2.2.1 is specific to state? Are you suggesting that it be more broad and looking at business license revenue? Right.
So, I think that's, and I think we do it. So a lot of these I'm assuming the city's doing. But yeah, it's like, number of business license, or, if we see business license going down, then apparently we're not maintaining that one goal. And that's really what a lot of these seem to track back to as far as a measure of success and how we track them. It's really, to me, kind of all goes back to that our budget remains stable and is not changing because of outside influences that we can't control. Or if it is, then at least we can respond to those.
So any proposed wording, David, and where we might put that, or?
That almost, to me, would be, again, back to the 2.3.1, because that's kind of a global study. But I do think it's I guess it is done. It is basically done as part of the budgeting process by city council. So maybe it's not.
Yeah, so I think it's like a lot of these strategies we're doing. So it's really the measure of success is that we're not seeing these, drastic changes in our funding streams.
Are you saying, David, we're seeing much higher demands, but the revenues aren't coming along with it?
No, again, I'm not sure. I'm not sure because I haven't looked kind of historically at what our budgeting streams are. I think again that's more of the city responsibility, our council responsibility. But the fact that we are actually monitoring those revenue streams, and if we see one become out of balance, and we did not identify that it was becoming out of balance, and take actions to prevent that, then we've failed in our measure of success. So I think our measure of success is that we're maintaining kind of the status quo funding stream from all different revenues. And these strategies just kind of separate that out into different streams that we're paying particular interest to.
I think that's and I'm hearing what David's saying. I'm struggling to put it with any one of the existing strategies. So I'm wondering if it's almost a new strategy under maintain a sound tax base. Right? Isn't that? I mean, it doesn't really fit because all the other strategies are so kind of specific. Doesn't really fit as a measure of success as one of those. It almost is a standalone separate strategy. Would you agree with that, David, or you see it otherwise?
I'm kind of reading back, sorry. Well, it kind of falls under 2.2, the kind of back at a high level, maintain a sound tax base. So we basically, to do that, we want to monitor, make sure the state's not changing laws that will impact our tax base from external, from the accommodation tax being one of them. But now we've kind of corrected that. That our tourism isn't changing, our balance of tourism isn't changing, that would affect our budget.
But
I thought that actually went into the first one.
Would this capture it, David, if we were to say, analyze revenue streams year to year to ensure consistency or to ensure, basically to ensure consistency?
How about maintenance and or growth?
I think David's just saying use it as a tool to analyze trends of what's happening. If rental license revenue starts going off the charts, it's almost the indicator that things are getting out of balance as to what they've historically been. Correct, David?
Right.
So does that verbiage capture it? Analyze revenue streams each year to ensure that a balance is maintained?
That kind of captures it. Yeah.
So let's put that in there as we're now running into 2-hour meetings. So let's put that in as like
a placeholder.
And if we can come up with better wording, we will. So how's the group feel? We're on 2 hours. 6:30.
Long day.
We ready to, you want to call it a night there and resume next month?
Sure.
Second.
Yep.
And we're,
I think so.
we're kind of, so we will, I think I have next up on the hit list, the cultural part of the comprehensive plan, which I think will be fairly easy. So let's finish this one for next month. We'll have on the agenda to finish these goals and try to start in on the cultural goals.
Sounds good.
That's good.
Hey, Douglas, can I ask one quick question? You had mentioned
Yes.
earlier that we had moved past the transportation element. And I was just wanted to clarify that was the intention. I thought I remember we tabled that one or put it on the burner to revisit just due to what was going on with council at the time with the parking.
I think you're probably right.
So maybe if there's a partial element of the economic section and then a partial element of transportation, maybe we could, parlay
well,
that
and of course, we're now in murkier water with transportation than we were then with this new legislation about, because we're really kind of waiting to see what was going to happen with the paying to park on the roadways. And now it's, like I said, it's even.
Well, there might have to be new strategies developed, which is what I was thinking of when you guys were talking here. My head was kind of trailing. What could we do as a community? Could we put up a gate and say we're a private community, but with public roads? I don't know if you could do that. Certainly a toll is just as unallowable as the paid parking that we were talking about, but what about a permit to park? Is that the same as?
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to open a can of worms. We're trying to come to a close. I just was thinking if there's a partial of two elements, maybe we could somehow combine it. But maybe the timing's not right. So
yeah, and you're right that we did delay on that discussion.
So I don't know if we want to add it to the agenda or not. Just a thought.
Okay.
On that note, I also wanted to reiterate that I probably won't be here next meeting. I did the math, and I think
that was sneaky.
You put that out there, and then
that was sneaky, Marty.
I want to be involved with it.
Appreciate it.
I just look. I did the math. I think I'm going to have a 1 day old at that point. So chances are not good that I'll be here next month. So.
That's right.
Well, we need to wait for our traffic engineer to be present. So we'll do cultural. We'll press on with the cultural element in your absence.
Fair enough.
We'll get the easy hitters out, the powder puffs.
Okay.
Any miscellaneous business?
I have one quick question. Training. Is that still required?
Yes.
Yes.
You going to send us information on that for the new members?
Yes. Yeah. And I don't know, David, David and Sandy, you probably did that orientation. I don't know that I've ever had.
People come back. Well, Lisa came back.
Lisa did. I don't know. I'll look into that. You may not have to do the initial orientation.
I had to do it again.
You did, Lisa?
I did do it again.
Okay. Well, maybe you do.
But it could have changed, especially given COVID and all. But
yeah,
I did do it again.
Yeah. Group training has been challenging. But yes, you do need to do that. And I'll send you some information on that, opportunities. On that, I will, Steve, David, and Sandy, I'll reach out to you individually before the next meeting, and we'll just share some information about, the comprehensive plan, basically the orientation packet that you didn't get because this meeting kind of came up so quickly after the appointment. We didn't have time, but between now and the next meeting, we'll get together.
And Marty, maybe I can coordinate with you to get the last version of the sheet, and I'll drive the next meeting and combine them.
Yep, good call.
All right. Well, good luck, Marty.
Good luck, Marty.
Yes. Good
We'll
luck.
see the bags under the eyes whenever your head comes back above water.
Thank you.
Well, if there's no other new business or miscellaneous business, we'll entertain a motion to call it quits.
So moved.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Nobody could be opposed. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good night,
everybody.
y'all.
Good
So
night.
long.